Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It just seems like a great way to kind of start the creative season with a discussion on how we as artists can work our business. And so I'm so delighted tonight to be able to have Jeanine Pennell join me. Now, Jeanine and I, oh my gosh, we met years ago. I think we found her on Instagram, honestly. Otherwise, I don't think we would have met. So, whatever marketing she was doing then definitely worked. And I invited her to join me for an artist interview way before COVID. And we just had a delightful time and really connected. And I've been following her journey since that time. So one of the things that has amazed me about Jeanine is her dedication to her artwork, but to the other things that go along with being an artist. And that's doing your social media and your newsletters and actually shouting out to the world, hey, I'm here. I have art that might speak to you. So that's something that I've admired as I followed her journey through the years. She has created such a beautiful relationship with the people who follow her and the people who receive her newsletters and the people who follow her on social media. And I am a huge fan of that. And I honestly, when I see your newsletters come out, it's like, oh boy, in this big long line of emails, it's like, oh, wait, I have one I really want to read instead of having to slog through all the others. And honestly, reading her newsletters always inspires me. And I know it touches and inspires all of you too. So, Jeanine, thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you for all that you do, not just in creating amazing characters, of which I have one sitting here, but also the stories that you share with us that we so connect with.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jennifer. And thank you to everybody who made time today to join us for this video call. Um, when you invited me the first time around to do one of these, I had such a great time that I couldn't wait to get together again. So when you reached out this past couple of weeks ago, I was just happy that you said, "Hey, let's get together again." I really appreciate it. And the things you said about me, thank you so much. I'll say that when I'm making and writing, I'm coming from a place of working alone. And so when I send these words and images out into the world, I am hoping that they are accepted and received in the manner that you're accepting them. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Makes a difference for me, I know. So tell us about yourself and your creative journey.
So I live in New Jersey. I'm a New Jersey artist. I've always lived in New Jersey. I live in a small town on a small farm with my husband. We have two dogs and four alpaca. And I have three grown children, and I like to do things that people who live in the country like to do, like hiking and biking and horseback riding. And I get to be a full-time artist. I wasn't always an artist. I used to have a picture frame shop for about 28 years. And I dreamed about being an artist. Like when I was younger, I had gone to the Art Students League for 1 year after high school, and then I went to Mason Gross. But back in the day, the only avenue for artists back then for making a living was to be a commercial artist. And back then, I just didn't have the wherewithal or the gumption, I suppose, to go out and market myself. I consider myself more of an introvert. I like meeting people, but I much rather stay home. So it wasn't one of those people who wanted to pound the pavement. So it made it easier for me to just sort of open up a little shop and have people come to me for their picture framing. But I always wanted to make things with my hands. I just didn't know what it was that I was going to be meant to do eventually. So about the age of 50 years old, my mom had gotten sick, and I realized at that time that life is short, and I really wanted to take some time and kind of research this idea of going back to being an artist. When I was younger, one of the things that really fascinated me was miniatures, like dollhouse miniatures. But I didn't see how that could possibly be a business, unless you had a dollhouse shop, and that wasn't something that interested me. So when my mom had gotten sick and I decided that I wanted to do an exploration, that's what I did. I went on a journey of trying to decide what kind of art inspired me. And so I took a bunch of classes. Um, and that's what I did. And it was through that process that I discovered clay.
Were you surprised that it was clay? And what was it about clay that really touched you?
Well, I'll say that I was surprised that it came through to that the pieces that I make came through that way because when I had been making dollhouse things 20 years ago, I'd used polymer clay and it was okay, but it wasn't singing to me. There was a lot of difficulties that I had with that. And when I went to clay, it was to learn how to throw. I had no thought that I was going to be a hand builder. It wasn't even a possibility on my radar. And so, yeah, in that aspect, I took the pottery class to learn how to throw. And there's a thing with working with your hands in clay that it's like you're a kid again. But I was a failed thrower. Everything we made, my husband took the class with me, and everything was like these short little salsa dishes, and things got just fallen over wet clay things. And luckily for me, there was one hand builder in that class. And she made these really cool, fantastical creatures. And she just she went like this to me one day and she said, "You have got to come over here to this table with me." And it was a bit of a lifeline. And that's where I sat and I started to make my little figures in clay. And actually it went back to when I was at the Art Students League for that 1 year in New York after high school, because all I did was study figure drawing for 1 year. I did figure drawing 5 hours a day, 5 days a week for 1 year.
Oh,
And that was the basis of knowledge that I rely on now, was put in my mind all those years ago. So it came back to me as if it was, never forgotten.
yes, yes. That it's amazing how a medium will definitely connect with you because I did a similar thing and I was taking as many classes at art students like here,
Oh,
and
you were, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so it's kind of fun to play. And then you look back over all of the years of even creating the miniatures and how what you were doing then applies now. So all of the things that have brought you to where you are today. So now let's get into the business side of things a little bit, which isn't quite as fun. But one of the more challenging things for me as an artist is all the work it takes to be successful. It's just as much about the business side as it is about the creative side. And how do you balance dealing with both of those things up in the air?
So for me, this is my full-time job. So what I do is I make a schedule. So, and I have this thought, like there's two sides of my brain. There's the artist side of the brain and there's the business side of my brain. So when I'm working in my studio, I actually block out time in my calendar. So every week at the beginning of the week, I sit down and I plan my week out. And I block in time for my studio time. That's only for creating. I turn off my phone. I don't do email. It's just putting music on and I'm going to be making. And then I also block in time where I have to do all of my business things. So I'll have to plan my social media posts. I'll have to plan the day that I'm going to write and send my email. I will have to schedule time in my day when I have to reply to all of my emails. I'll have to schedule time in my day when I pack up and ship items. I have to plan when I'm going to apply to my shows. And so I treat it like I work for somebody. I work for somebody else, not the artist part of things, but the business part. And if I don't get the business things done and I worked for somebody else, I would get fired.
Mhm.
I have a serious talking to that person. So that's the thought that I always have as far as, treating both sides, because there's a lot of things in the business side that I don't want to do. I want to just spend my whole time creating, but in reality, you can't do that. And so that's just the way that I do it. And I think Like a lot of people are just waiting for inspiration to hit them, but I'm the kind of the person who thinks that inspiration is out there. It's just waiting to find you working. And I always think of like famous authors and even the comedian Jerry Seinfeld. He makes a practice every day of just sitting down and working at his craft. Like he blocks out time. And so that's the way I plan it. And then the other thing I do too is I make money goals for myself. So I have goals that I want to reach, and then I have to go figure out how I'm going to reach those goals. And then I fill out my calendar with the shows or the events or any online things that I'm going to do in order to sort of plot out
Mhm.
what how my whole year is going to be.
In order to support that money goal.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And along that way, other things will pop into my, world. Like for instance, I just wrote an article for a magazine and I don't know if it's going to get published, but I created that time in my schedule. I sat down and I wrote the article. I hired a photographer to come in and photograph, and I'm going to package it all up and send it to the magazine. And so I'm also thinking of other ways for me myself to, get marketing that's going to not necessarily cost me any money. It's going to take time, but I think of it as if I worked for somebody else. How would they market their business?
That makes a lot of sense to me. And I think um, it seems so easy to go, well, if I only work on this one thing, something needs to be done around the house,
Oh, yeah.
I'll just do that and then I'll get back in the studio and somehow it's the end of the day and it's like, oh no, nothing's moved on my work table. So I love that you plan that out so far in advance and that you take it as seriously as if you're working for yourself and to honor yourself by doing it that way.
Yeah, I think that the idea, and actually, my studio is in my living room. So, yeah, it is a slippery slope because the washing machine is two doors down. Like it's not unheard of, but you have to honor the fact that you're working for yourself. And when you plot out your calendar and you stick to the calendar, if you say at 12 o'clock, I'm going to stop and do this, you're surprised at how much your time actually opens up. It's interesting. The time does not control me. I now can control the time. It's fascinating that way.
How did you initially approach building your audience, and how has that evolved over the years?
So when I first started, I had my frame shop for about 28 years. So I understood that like your customer base are going to always be repeat customers. You're going to have like 80% of the people will continue to buy from you as long as you can continue connecting with them. And so when I first started out way, way back in the beginning, we always did like direct mail. Or we would phone call people. I would always call people who came into my, like I always collected mailing addresses from people way back in the day. So I knew about communicating with people on a regular basis. So when I first started this, I always collected people's emails. I always had like a book out at a show, and I would collect emails from people. I didn't know what I was going to do with them at the time, but I kept them. I gave out business cards. And so I slowly started to build like that little email list out. And then in the beginning, I emailed very infrequently. I was always afraid that people were going to unsubscribe, and I didn't want that, and I didn't want to bother them. But I would always, if I was going to go to a show, I would email people and let them know I was going to come to a show. But I was not as focused on at it. It was a little haphazard. I did a little social media. Back in the day, I didn't even have a website. Sold some pieces through Etsy, but mostly it was just in like the student show or little pop-up shows here and there. Um, and then a couple of years ago, actually 2 years ago, January, I decided that I was going to start emailing once a week. I had decided that in order for my business to be built, like I had big goals. I needed to be consistent about showing up. And one of the things I would do is send emails to people on a regular basis. And that's what I started to do. And I saw an increase in my business that was significant. And I continue to get email subscribers, but most of the time it's from meeting people in person at shows.
Now, have you seen people unsubscribe from your list a lot? And
Oh, all the time.
oh, so it's not me
All
then.
the time. My friends unsubscribe from me. I haven't had any relatives, but it's hard, but I keep this in mind. I think it to myself that they're just not interested right now. It's not necessarily that they don't like me. I had a client here, no joke, who bought a sculpture from me 2 years ago, and he unsubscribed from my newsletter, and he came into my studio this past Thanksgiving, and it said to me, "Oh, I haven't heard from you in a long time. Did you take me off your email list?" And I said, "No, I know the day that you unsubscribed from me." And he said, "No, I didn't do that." And I said, "Yes, you did. But that's okay." And having that, and then he came and he bought a sculpture from me because he said to me, "I know you're out there, and when I want to buy something from you, I'm going to find you." So I know there's those kinds of people, but also, more importantly, there's the kind of people like you, Jennifer, who are waiting to hear from me. And those are the people I keep in my mind. I keep in my mind 5 or 6 people who I know in particular who are waiting to hear from me. And that's all I need, just that in my mind to keep from worrying about all the people who unsubscribe.
Yeah. Yeah, you try not to take it personal, but sometimes when you see who's unsubscribing, it's kind of
Yeah.
shocking sometimes. One thing that you brought up when we did our first interview that has kept me focused and inspired because I tend to do very whimsical kinds of things, focus on animals. And I've um, had people say, but you're not really an artist because it's not like you're Vincent van Gogh or one of these people. But what you said to me that has stuck with me to this day is when you're doing a festival, that there are people who will walk by your tent and look in and shake their heads and walk away. And out of 100 people, 8 will step in and you're creating for the 8. And I will never, ever forget that you stay focused on your audience and you do what brings you joy.
Yeah. It's the most important thing because that's why we're making artwork that's coming from someplace that's inside of us, and we can't help but make that art. And it's going to connect to some people. It's not going to connect with everybody. And that's okay. Because what I like, it might not be something that you like. And the other thing that I find is my art in particular, it creates a reaction from somebody. It always does. It could be a very negative reaction, like, "Oh, those things creep me out," or it can be a positive reaction. But I have joy in both because somebody reacted to them. They're not vanilla.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. So true.
Yeah.
So you already addressed this, but so your newsletters go out once a week. Do you send them out at a certain time, or how do you decide? Have you done the studies on, the
No,
magical time to send things out?
no. I don't first of all, I use social media and email simply for marketing. So I spend almost no time on social media. I use those platforms because they're free.
Hmm.
And Mark Zuckerberg has given us this free platform. So I'm not interested in figuring out any algorithms. I don't care about any of that. I just send out things every either once a week or every day. And I spend no time worrying about what time of day, how long it is. I just speak from the heart. And it's the same thing with my emails. I mean, let me put it to you this way. If I have a show, if on my show schedule, so I'm doing my show schedule for the summer, I always send my emails out the night before a show starts. And I always load my shop up with all of the available artwork because in my mind, everybody is available to come to my show. So if you live in California and you can't make it to my show at Rittenhouse Square in Philadelphia, you can still feel like you're there. You can still buy from me. I'm making it easy for you. I want you to be here for me. I have created this artwork for this show. You don't live here, but you can still be part of this show. So that's when I always send that. Otherwise, and if you sign up for my email, you'll get a welcome email and it will tell you I send an email out once a week. It could be Thursday, Friday, or sometimes Saturday because it depends what day I get to it. But I know I'm going to do it one of those days. Sometimes it's on Sunday as well.
Your postings on social media, in many cases, is what you've done in your newsletter. So
Yep.
you take the content and you just reformat it and put it in so you only need to create it once.
Well, I'll tell you, MailChimp, I use MailChimp as my newsletter provider, and they make it very easy. It's sort of seamless. When you finish writing your email, they give you an option if you have your Facebook page connected to MailChimp and also Instagram, and so you can easily do it that way. Um, so it's seamless to do it that way. And so most times I do. But this year, what I have decided to do, because I noticed how successful my email campaign is, I have been posting daily on the social media platforms. So I have been trying to create content every day. And it's usually just a short, again, a little short message, a short story that I've written, something that's gone on, a piece, a story about a piece. And I try and post those every day as well to see how that is going to reach people.
Hey, we're on MailChimp as well, and it never dawned on me to do that. I'm going to have to.
Yeah.
Now, you're writing once a week. Well, now clearly you're writing once a day. How do
Well, the thing
you?
is, I actually have a process that I do. There's a book that I read many years ago. It's called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Yes.
And she describes a daily practice of writing longhand, 3 pages a day. And so I do that. I write every single day. I wake up 4 o'clock in the morning. I come down to my studio. I turn all my lights on. I brew a pot of tea and I sit down and I write longhand for the first, I would say, 20 minutes in the morning. So anything that goes into those marble notebooks, it's whatever I'm thinking about. It's just like a brain dump. I don't like to use those words, and it's not journaling. It's just thoughts I have. And that is usually where I mine for most of my stories. So, and I've gotten so good at it that things just drop into my head all the time now. But if I'm like looking for something or I'm looking for a connection between what I'm making and why I'm making it, I'll go into those notebooks and I'll search for the answer in there. And that's where I come up with my stories.
Now, they're in many cases very personal stories. So,
Yeah.
what made you decide to kind of open yourself up to sharing exactly who you are and exactly what you're thinking?
Well, it was important for me in the beginning when I started to make these pieces to understand why I make them. It was the most important thing for me to understand. And I remember even saying to my husband at the time, please do not ask me what these are because I don't want to have to explain what they are right yet. I don't know what they are. And they're weird. I mean, I've got some strange pieces. And so it really was important for me to spend time wondering, like, where are these coming from? And that's where the journaling, again, I don't like to use the word, but that's where the writing began to explore, like, why are you choosing these colors? Why is it important for these to have this like weathered look? And then I realized that all of these pieces that I make, this is me illustrating my life. These are drawings that illustrate my life. This happens to be in 3 dimension. And so that's what they are. They're all stories, and they're springing from a time in my life when I had moved from one house to another, and I was like a little lost soul. And so that's what they remind me of. And so that's why. And then I found that once I discovered that, I wanted to share that information. It's interesting to me. And when I started to tell people the stories, they also shared the same stories. And that's when I knew I had connection with people.
It's so true that, I'll read something you've written and it's like, they're conversational. It's like you're talking to me and you're saying I get you, I understand you. And so when even when it translates into social media, you'll hit me on a day, kind of like The Artist's Way, and kind of like some of the other books that come out, you just happen to read the page and go, how did you know? And I get that on that. It feels like we're talking over the coffee for me and the tea for you, that I'm talking to a good friend of mine. And then you add a photo of your art, which always brings a smile to my face. So the
Yeah.
conversational thing, how did you, is that something that you practice, or is that just a way that you write?
Well, first of all, when I'm writing my emails, I am very impatient. So when somebody sends me an email, I'm usually reading it on my phone, and I have about 3.5 seconds to get through it. So I need you to get to the point. That's how I'm reading an email. And so that's how I write an email. I think to myself, I only want to use, I don't know, 100 words, but I want to get right to the point rather than drag it all out. And so I will write a full page, and then I will go through and I will edit it so that what I've cut out is all of the stuff that doesn't matter. And I get just right to the point. And the interesting thing is that's a reflection of my personality. If you meet me in person and we are in conversation, I will just get right to the point with people. Like my brother will call me up on the telephone, and I'll say, "Hi, how are you?" I wouldn't even say how are you. I will say, "What's going on? Like, what do you need?" I get right to the point. And so I suppose that's how my writing is reflected. I just don't need all that excess stuff.
Yes.
Does it
And
make
so
sense?
it does. It absolutely does. And I tend to be very wordy on things, but I've been trying to narrow that down just a little bit more. Now, you have a usual format for your newsletters, right?
Well, I'm such a not interesting person. I use MailChimp, and they have the first plate, like template on their website. I use that. I use the same one over and over again. But again, it's like this. For me, the most important thing is the artwork and the story. And then I usually have a call to action. Like this past week's newsletter was, we have this Zoom call here. Let me know if you want to join us. Here's the link. I don't try and fill my emails with lots of things for people to do because I know I'm going to reach you again next week. And people really don't want to know about lots of things to do. They only want one thing to do. And so that's what I provide them with. And then I just use that same template over and over again. And it seems to work for me.
Mhm. Oh, it absolutely does. I think I've mentioned to you, and I know I've had other people mention the same thing to me, and that is, we want all your stories in a book. We don't want all your artwork in a book, and
Oh,
it can be like our,
I know.
you know, our morning pages, what's the wisdom for the day? What currently are your biggest challenges?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges that I have right now is maintaining a good work-life balance.
Mhm.
I come from a long line of hard workers. My families are all hard workers. My husband's a hard worker. And so we're people who will keep working until projects are done. And so what that means is sometimes I'm just not carving up enough time for myself. So I really have knuckled down just for the beginning at the beginning of this year and I like putting in my calendar all of my personal things first.
Mhm.
And then I'm building in my work time around it because I feel at this point in my career that I have built enough of I've been building momentum for the last 3 or 4 years now that I can slow down a little bit
Mhm.
and begin to like remember like you have got to refill the well. So that's about like what I would consider my biggest challenge. I could work all the time. I'd be in my studio all the time if I could. I love it. It's the greatest thing.
Yeah, we were talking before we actually let everybody in because we were just checking lighting and stuff. And it's like, aren't we lucky? I mean, we really do have the opportunity to do exactly what we love to do.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's the best. And to have like an audience of people who are just so grateful that you're making, that's for sure.
Oh, it is. It's such an honor. You don't know sometimes why you're making what you're making, and then somebody will walk into a booth and it hits them right on the spot, and you go, "Oh, well, that's why I made it." And that's the
Yeah.
story behind it because it connected with them right where they're at that particular moment.
And the other thing with that is that people bring their own stories to the work. So
Yeah.
that's what I always find fascinating is when people come into my booth at shows and they see a piece and it reminds them of something that, is not even anything that I would have even thought of. And they bring their own stories to it. And I love that. I really do. I
Yes.
think that's what makes a piece of artwork complete, actually.
Yeah. Well, so true. I think sometimes naming something, I worry if I name something a certain way that it's going to force, the person seeing it to think a certain way, so trying to make sure that when you're adding things to it, that you still leave space for it to breathe somehow and meet people where they are. But now you talked about how you send out an email like a night before a show. When you know a show is coming up, how do you go about marketing that show or that event?
Well, usually I'm teasing the show for a while. For instance, I had a solo show this past October in Newtown at a gallery, and I teased that show a year before. So I was talking about that show maybe every once a month in a newsletter because I'm sending out an email once a week. So I would be talking about it in between not knowing even when the dates were going to be for that show. But if I, for instance, I will usually start teasing a show about a month before it's actually happening. So I have a show at Charlie Cummings Gallery in Florida. It's going to happen in March. I'll be a featured artist there. And I have started teasing that show in my newsletters at the beginning of January. So planting seeds. And I've also been planting seeds on Instagram already for that show. So usually I try and do that about a month and a month and a half before, creating excitement and realizing that when we're watching, for instance, when we're watching television, how many times have we seen um, a commercial for any of those insurance companies, the Geico commercial? We see that 1,000 times, 1,000 times. And so we have to realize that it takes a lot of impressions for people to make decisions.
And then as you get closer within, say, a couple of weeks and then within a couple of days, how does that change?
So what will happen usually the week before when I send out my email, I will indicate here's the information for the directions to get to the show. And also if it's a show that's an indoor show or you need to have tickets to get in, I always try and offer my people free or reduced admission if it's available from the show. And then, like I said, usually I send it out the day before. I understand my audience is like me. So that's another thing I could offer to any artist is most of the time you'll find that the people who collect your work are most like you. So I know me personally. If you told me, Jennifer, we're going to have a show in a month, I'm pretty much the kind of person who says, I really need to know about that show about 1 or 2 days beforehand. That's how I operate. And so I know my people operate the same way. So they want to know the night before, oh, by the way, this weekend I'm going to be at that show. That's when they want to know. And so that's when I send it out. But everybody else has different kinds of audiences. Some audiences like to know and mark it on their calendar a month before.
Yeah. Yeah, and life's so busy. It's
Yes.
so busy. It's like I've got 15 things going, and that's not the one that's coming up the soonest. So I need to focus on what's
Right.
happening now. So that makes great sense.
But the other thing I wanted to tell you about, like how do I nurture or take care of the people who are already my collectors that I find most important is like once people buy from me, I want to make sure that they stay with me. So I, number one, try to excel at customer service. Okay, so for instance, if I ship out something and it arrives damaged, I immediately issue a refund and I send them a shipping label for the item to be returned to me. There's never any questions asked. And I usually ship out my work within 24 hours of any online sales. Like I I'm always thinking about what my customers are thinking. So if a piece is broken, they can return it to me and I'll repair it at no charge. Also, people can always exchange back a piece that they've purchased from me, or I will buy back a piece if they don't want it. So I try and like keep them and let them know this. Like I always tell people this so that they feel as though like they're buying a piece of artwork, but they also know that I have value in that artwork. Um, that's very important to me. And then I always grow my business by going to shows. I think the best way to grow an audience is to get out in front of people and let them experience your artwork and let them experience you. And for me, those outdoor shows or those in-person shows are the cheapest billboard that you could buy because you'll get your artwork out in front of the most people that you could possibly get it out in front of, and you can collect emails from them and they can see you in person. And so they get a feel for you and you tell them what you're all about. And for me, a lot of times in my booth, I have stories printed up so people get a taste of what I'm all about besides just seeing my artwork in person.
The in-person festivals, those are a lot, a lot of work and a lot of heavy lifting, sandbags and all kinds of
Yeah.
things. But there's something about connecting with somebody and just standing there and, like you said, watching them react to your work. At Artburst we do online shows, and so it's a little difficult sometimes to create that sense of story and that bond with the artist. That's why we do interviews, just so that you can listen to them and talk to them a little bit. But yeah, I'll admit it's so much work, and after every day I'd be exhausted, but I always felt like I got way more out of it than they got out of it, because it was just such a joy to talk to them and to hear their stories, and to see their reaction to my work.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. The reaction that people get from your work, and also you get really good at talking about your work. And that's practice. And the only way you get practice is by doing it. And so even the way I talk about my work has evolved over the years. And the like interacting with people, interacting with my artwork and seeing what they saw in my artwork that brought a new understanding about my artwork to me. And I never would have gotten that if I hadn't been out in front of an audience. So that's invaluable to me.
When you hear their stories about how they take in the different pieces that they see or that they fall in love with, does that inspire other pieces for you?
No, I have to say that all of the pieces that I make are personal to me. Like I never bring anybody else's story into me. In fact, in the beginning, I used to do commissions. I don't do that anymore. I'm not interested in I'm just not interested in trying to make somebody else's vision of things.
Yeah.
It's not coming out from inside of me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, how have you and your work grown just over the last few years? What differences do you see in your work from when you first started?
Well, I'm making full bodies now, which I hadn't really made much before. That evolved. I've been making a lot more fish cars. I've always made those, but this year, for instance, I'm going to focus mostly on fish cars. I have a show in September along the river here, and I'm making a large body of fish cars for that show. I don't know. I mean, people will see my work and they'll say that it has come, it has evolved tremendously. And I guess it has. I always see it the same as it always was. I think I've just become way more confident in my materials because of of the way of the amount of work I've created. And so I don't have as many struggles as I once had, and I think that that is the biggest thing that's happened. And once I open that door about understanding where the artwork comes from, it really cannot be closed. And so I've also, oh, you know what? The other thing I did this year, I started incorporating paper mache in with my sculptures, and I really like that because way back in the day, I used to love paper mache, and so I kind of reintroduced it and combined in a couple of pieces, and I'm having fun with that.
Nice. Now, have you taken any recent classes?
I have a friend Tyree that I took a class with her to learn how to do her making fur technique. She's a sculptor as well. And I took an online course with Kelsey Bowen, who is a figurative sculptor, and that's where I learned her body making technique. And yeah, I love the way that she did her bodies, and so I kind of stole that from her. I mean, I paid for it, but yeah.
Okay, so tell me their names again, just in case somebody
Oh.
wants to follow up with.
My friend Tyree, her last name is Dwork, Dwork. She teaches at the clay studio that I teach at Lisa Naples' studio in Frenchtown. She is on Instagram. She's an amazing she makes animals for the most part. She's been doing a little figurative work as well, but she's really known for her animal sculptures in clay. She's an awesome teacher. If anybody could ever take a workshop with her, she's great. And then Kelsey Bowen, she is a very good ceramic artist. So those are
Nice.
two hotties. Yeah.
Okay, so now everybody knows who you can follow on Instagram. And then
Yes.
you teach as well.
I do. I do workshops. In fact, I have a workshop that's up on the board at Lisa Naples. It's a 4-day workshop. I think it's in May. And yeah, I'll teach a larger head sculpture class. It's great. My students are awesome. They always come up with good things. It's just a limited workshop, but it's open. There's 6 spots available if anybody's interested in coming to New Jersey and take a class with me.
Oh, nice. I'm gonna show
Yeah,
up one day. I'm gonna
I would
like
love that.
gonna type in a name that you won't recognize and then I'll pop in. Hi, I'm here.
That
Okay.
would be awesome.
Oh, we'd have more fun, wouldn't we?
Oh, for sure.
What do you wish you would have known when you started as an artist?
I first of all, I wished I'd known that if you make what you love to make, that there are people out there in the world who will buy it. That's amazing to me. That if as long as you are creating some things that you love, that authentically you're making things that you love to make, you will find an audience in the world because the world is not it's big, but there's lots of people out there. It's crazy. And the other thing is that people want to hear from you. People do want to hear from you. They met you in a place, they liked your artwork. They may have not bought from you that day, but they want to hear from you. I think that was the one thing, the hurdle that I needed to get over, especially with regards to my newsletter, uh, realizing that I'm not bothering people and that they do want to open those emails and they want to read them. Oh,
Yes.
and there's other one thing I want to tell people. Make it easy for people to buy from you. That is the most important thing. And I find that as an artist, I always try and tell other artists to do that. It's easy to get a website with Squarespace, and they make it so simple for you to build a website and to put e-commerce on there. It is so important to make it easy for people to buy from you.
I mean, I look and I know there's times when I go, want to pull my hair out with the technology, but look where we are. Look what we're doing.
Yeah.
We never would have met before. Look at all of these people joining us tonight, and hopefully this conversation is going to assist them as they follow in their journey, whether they're an artist or an art lover. And so, so at Squarespace, Shopify, there's a number of them out there, and they offer such great support.
Yeah, and they're simple to follow. And also, I just redid my whole website and I just watched YouTube videos in order to do it. It's crazy.
It is crazy. And if you go, well, go look at Janine's website and mine is actually in the process of getting done. So it's not looking so good right now. But look at the websites of the artists that you absolutely love and go, oh, I like that. None of us are going to be upset if you set up a website that has a similar look to it.
Yeah.
Um, so Kelly says she likes your new website.
Thanks. I like it too.
What's one thing you'd recommend that artists start with that can begin the process of making a difference for them as it relates to making that connection with people?
Let me think. Um, well, you know what? The number one thing that I think artists should do in order to do that is I think that they should figure out why they make the artwork that they make. I think that that was the most important thing for me to figure out is to figure out, why I'm making the pieces that I'm making. Why am I using the materials that I'm using? Um, why do I use the color? Why are you using the colors? What is the significance of the things that you're making? And that may take some time for you to figure that out as an artist. But once you figure that out, I think that's the key to being able to communicate to other people what your artwork means. And I think once you make that connection, I think you'll be able to talk more easily about your artwork because it's hard. Like a lot of people say, "Oh, I want my artwork to talk for itself." But you know what? I went to a gallery show or actually a museum show with a friend of mine who is not an artist. And in this particular exhibit, the artist included a short story about why she made the art that she made. And with each piece, she had described what her life was like at the time that the piece was completed, kind of like what I was doing. And once we read the descriptions, you step back from the work and you can't help but see, what she was going through at the time. And I remember my friend saying, like, wow, like this opened up a whole new door for me to understand this artwork. And she felt a connection to that artwork more so because now she understood where the artist was coming from. So I would spend time, that would be the biggest advice I would be able to tell people. And then you can take that information that you learn about what you know about why you make what you make, and then you can begin to talk to people about it. And then you can have a dialogue. And then that's where you start making connections with people.
Now, Kelly says she's got a WordPress website with a specific theme. I'm not sure that we can direct you on specifically what theme you
Yeah,
should.
yeah, and the type of web, like I'm not familiar with WordPress, so I don't know. I wouldn't be able to give any advice on that.
Kelly, if you just take a look at some of your favorite artists, sometimes if you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see if they're with Shopify or if they're with what Faso Fine Art Artists or something. You'll see where that website is from, and you may be able to recognize that theme if you go into those different sites and go, "Oh yeah, I like the way this is laid out," and you might be able to find it there. But I know I don't have the technological knowledge to be able to advise you on that. I'm lucky I have an amazing web developer person who assists. But I was on Shopify when I started and it worked great. And I know lots of people who are on Squarespace. So yeah, so take a look at those things and you may be able to find something that works for you there. Because it is simple. It takes time, but I think it'll come together for you for sure if you work your way through the steps and you'll find a website that's going to feature you and your art the way that you want it to be.
Yeah, and also as far as the Squarespace was, I just went onto YouTube and I Googled beginner's guide to, and then put in the little word. And then what you'll get is like I got a 1 hour video by a lady who did a tremendous job at teaching me how to build my Squarespace website. And I could just like pause it and go to my website and do what she told me to do, and then go back and forth and back and forth. It was amazing.
It's not expensive, right?
No. Yeah, and they also, and then you have your e-commerce right in there, and you can schedule it. I don't know. I find it's incredibly easy to use and amazing.
Jeanine, we've talked about a lot of things tonight, and we're about 5 minutes before 7 Denver time, and I know it's getting especially late for you. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, I just, when I'm thinking about my business, I think the most important thing is being a self-employed person is your mindset. I think it's the one thing that you can control. You can't control the weather and you can't control the economy, but what you can control are your thoughts around those things. And I found that that is the most important thing at being successful in business because there's shows that I do. If I had known before I went to the show what kind of show it was going to be. Like I had done one in the springtime that was one of those little outdoor street fairs. It was 4 hours long. And I did it on a whim and I promoted the heck out of it. And I had all of my people come out and I had a tremendous time. But I am telling you, my thoughts about the show were it's a spring show. People want to get out of their house and they're going to come and see me at this show and it made for a great, but people next to me didn't have nearly as good a show as I did because they didn't have the same mindset as I did. They showed up, they thought the weather was bad, that people weren't going to come, oh, they don't have very expensive things here. They had all kinds of thoughts about those things. And I think it resulted in their show. So I think if you have a hard time, with something, and if you can get your mind clear on it and have a better attitude about it, I think it makes it a lot easier. I think that's one little bit of advice I
I,
like to give.
there was somebody told me this one then once, and it stayed with me. And it's the person who's most invested in your art and selling your art is you. You can't just hand it off to somebody else and go, okay, well, it's the gallery's job or it's somebody else's job. It's you because people aren't just purchasing the art. They're purchasing you and your story and the relationship that you have with them. And yeah, it's amazing. So I love that a 4 hour show, that in many cases would have been easy to write off
Yeah.
became a show for you.
Yeah, it was great. It was awesome. Yeah. And
Okay.
even like this event, like I was happy to be part of it and I don't know what to expect, but it's like, why not? Like, let's do it. Let's have fun. That's what life is all about.
It's so true. It's so true. All right. Well, thank you for joining us tonight, Jeanine. I know that you've had a busy year behind you and you're still working on a lot of things and that time is precious. And we're so glad that you were willing to take time with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was awesome. Anytime, Jennifer, anytime.
That sounds great. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. And if you're not subscribed to Janine's newsletter, go
Ah.
right there. Now, what's your website, Janine?
Oh, my website is bonetownstudio.com.
Sign up for her newsletter because if you're not on her newsletter list, you're going to be so glad that you joined because just listening to her stories and you can learn so much about her and her work just reading those stories. So get out there, think about what was said tonight and just take one thing, just one thing to do that is going to absolutely move you forward. So thank you very much. And we'll
Yeah.
see you at the next one.
Thanks again, Jennifer.
Thank you, Janine.